razzle dazzle, we're the best. No, the courts aren't on your side, but they're not on the tenant side either.
Jen,
Like, you are independently wealthy when you are naked.
I am over treating property management the same as real estate sales.
I guess I'll lead the witness. I think it's freaking scammy. Welcome to Hold It with PM Jen, the show for real estate investors who buy and hold forever and ever. Amen. Welcome to Hold It with PM Jen, the show for buy and hold investors who buy, hold forever and ever. Amen. I'm Jen. I'm a real estate investment educator, advocate, and during the day, broker and owner at One Focus Property Management. Today, I have two guests. The first guest is Jessie Rulin. She's my sister. She'll absolutely destroy your self-confidence with just one swipe. But more importantly, the thing she does second best is run every bit of operations at One Focus Property Management. Thank you for joining us, Jessie.
Oh, you're welcome.
And today we have guest Devon Verno. She is a partner with CourtZip, a company that is focused on making the local court filing process just as easy as possible for landlord investors. And that's only one of the reasons Devon is the perfect choice for our eviction episode. Welcome to the eviction episode. She has been in property management almost 20 years, having worked for heavy hitters like Home 365 and Slate House Group, where the portfolios were over several thousand doors. She is now operational partner of a boutique management company, 𝐼ct Property Management in York, Pennsylvania. But it's not going to be boutique for long, because in the last 18 months of their existence, they've already grown a portfolio of 150 doors. Devon, thank you for taking time to come and do this with me.
I appreciate you having me. Thank
you. That's awesome. You've worked in property management for some time. Can you tell us what got you started in real estate, and then specifically the wonderful, glamorous world of property management?
So my story is maybe a little bit different than a lot of people's. I wasn't looking for real estate. At the time that I had got my license, I had just had my second daughter, and she was born with a condition called osteogenesis imperfecta. It's referred to as OI, or brittle bone disease. So her condition makes her break bones very easily. So I had a 2-year-old at that time, a newborn who was born with 13 broken bones, and we were completely just dying, like, underwater, medical debt, all this stuff, young couple. My husband was in his 6th year of teaching, so teachers don't make a lot of money even in York. So real estate kind of found me through that, because I know I needed something that was flexible, that I could, go to all the appointments, the specialists, the surgeries, So got my real estate license in 2006, 2007. Tried that buying, selling thing for the first 6 months and was like, this is not for me. I wasn't from the area. I didn't have a lot of connections. So I was like, this is not going to work. And just kind of on a whim, I saw back when they would post job ads in newspapers, there was a property management position. I was like, oh, I can go do this. And that's how it started. So, and for some reason, I really, really like it.
Yeah, I mean, and you seem to have taken to it quite a lot. And I'll tell you, I'm very excited to have met you. I think I met you almost a year ago at a women's real estate investor meetup. And when you told me that you were associated with those former companies, I know them because I'm aware of who in Pennsylvania is managing so many doors. I'm really interested in, for the many years you worked with portfolios, say in excess of 5,000 doors. I know you started with that one company at 300 doors, you grew them to over 5,000, and then there was an acquisition and you were managing over 8,000. I'm just really interested to know what you would share with our typical clients. You and I have the same kind of clients, One Focus and 𝐼ct Property Management. What are some of the takeaways you took from a monster machine like that you apply in your boutique company now?
Specifically for our owners, one, communication is super important, as you obviously know in the property management industry, but not just us to our owners to them. We need to make sure we, set clear expectations, make sure they are aware, of our, processes, because that's how we do business. That's how it's how you have to do it. And that may seem very basic, but when you're dealing with thousands of units, if you're not doing everything the same way, if you're not having the same expectations set for everybody, things get crazy, things, crashes and burns, that kind of deal. But that would be my biggest thing is, again, as simple as that sounds, but it's so crucial. It is so crucial.
And, I call it as something a little different in our office. I call it showing leadership in the position, right? So when you're talking about needing to communicate with your owner, the client, the property owner, there's always communication then with the tenant, usually if it's occupied, your team, vendors, and then it could be city government, anybody else. And so we talk about communication, and a lot of times things get put in that bucket. But what you were sort of conveying to me was not only is it communication, but it's knowing what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and then confidently show those people. Yeah, so we talk a lot at One Focus about it's time to show some leadership here.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Now, you're a partner in CourtZip and 𝐼C Property Management, and I love what 𝐼C stands for. Can you tell us?
𝐼C stands for Acquire, Renovate, and Keep. So we are big fans of the buy and hold theory.
Keep forever and ever. Amen. And why are you so passionate about buy and hold? What lights you up about that?
I mean, there's, obviously your financial, positives to that, but really it's knowing your property. If you're buying something and you're only having it for a few months and then you buy something else, nothing wrong with that, but they're not all the same. So by holding something, again, you develop that consistency, that, again, kind of coming back to a communication thing of what the expectation is and what this is going to look like. And you learn the flow and you develop a rhythm. And that's, especially in this industry, I just think that that's so important.
Right. It really is. Another thing that's important in order to be an expert, Matt Whitaker of Evernest talks about this. He talks a lot in sports analogies, and he talks about having reps, doing reps. And speaking of reps, nobody counts. It's uncouth to count. But do you have any idea how many evictions you've either done or supervised? I mean, are we at 1,000?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thousands, probably.
Thousands. Wow. Yeah. Okay. So you are the expert. Is there any part of the eviction process you haven't done 500 times?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Now, my husband, Dave Maustoller, wants me to ask you. Because I said, I'm talking to you and you've done all these evictions, and he and I talk about this sometimes at home, about a need for this. He wants to know, do you take any kind of weapons or means of self-defense with you to post notices, attend hearings, attend evictions, or meet tenants to handle their belongings?
No.
Okay.
I do not. I don't. And that's kind of crazy because I'm a 5-foot redhead, right? So I'm going in some rougher sections of different cities, but I've never had an issue. Even when somebody's hostile, you kind of know how to read the room. If I'm feeling uncomfortable, I'll leave the situation. If it's an actual lockout where we're there changing the locks, I have a constable with me. He's carrying. I'm covered in that. So really, I've been very fortunate. I've had some few weird situations, but nothing, life-threatening.
Same here. And I mean, you can tell from the tone of that question, he believes these things are necessary in the line of work. And I'm with you. I have never carried in the line of work. And it was so funny. The first maybe like 6 or 7 years of working in multifamily and doing evictions on my property, we had a constable who worked with us, and he was a little Latino man. He was so adorable. He was older, and he wore a suit, and he might have had a gun on him, but I never saw it. Right. And so I worked with him, and I'm 6 foot tall, and behind him, doing these I never worried about my safety. Anyway, I moved to the other side of the river in that market I was in, and it was just a whole different environment. I remember the first time the constable showed up to do a possession, and he had like Rambo has those bullets crossways on his chest, and I had an attitude with him. I was like, "Whoa, bro, can you cool it on my property here? There's families." And he was like, "I'll decide what's necessary and what's not." And in that moment, I was like, "Oh, so this whole time this has been really dangerous? Oops, guess that was lucky." Yeah, and the constables I've worked with since have not had such a formal dress requirement as that first one. You know what's better than building generational wealth? Not a damn thing. And obviously the best way to do that is through buy and hold real estate. But let's be real, managing your properties yourself, that's a one-way ticket to burnout. This is supposed to be an investment, not a burden. At One Focus Property Management, we don't just manage your properties, we make buy and hold real estate actually work. We handle everything: tenant screening, maintenance, rent collection, you name it. All you do is watch your portfolio and net worth grow. We make sure you never even think about quitting real estate investing, because the secret to buy and hold is to hold it for a very long time. And you can't do that when you sell every time you have a problem. We're the biggest, baddest property management team in Lycoming, Clinton, Northumberland, Montour, and Columbia counties. And we do it all to give you more protection, less work, and absolutely no drama. So let's turn your rental properties into wealth-building machines. Learn more at onefocus.pm.com. That's onefocus.pm.com. Well, let's go to our next segment called Hold Up. Let me get this straight. We're going to talk about misconceptions around evictions. And I am a lady in America who makes videos and puts them on the internet with, as I like to say, my real birth certificate name and face about evictions and how to enforce your lease contracts. And I'm here to tell you that most people have no idea the reality of this court process truly is what it is. And I know you know that. I know you know that. I want to know one of the misconceptions that really grinds your gears. And I'm sure it's brought up to you all the time, given your job.
I have two, actually. One is that you have to have an attorney in order to file a landlord-tenant complaint, which is the first step in a multiple-step eviction process. The second thing is that it is a multiple-step eviction process. So the initial filing, which is referred to as a landlord-tenant complaint filing, you file, with the local district magistrate. You put in what the breach of lease is, submit it out, and then from there you go to your hearing. At the hearing, the judge is going to award you a judgment if you win, and then from there there's a second step, which is an order of possession. Third step then is the actual lockout. The landlord-tenant complaint, even if you win in court, does not mean your tenant is evicted. It also does not translate that this tenant was previously evicted. There's a lot of property management companies and a lot of landlords don't understand that they're two different things. Yes. So having a judgment on your account or on your record is very different than having an eviction on your report.
Yeah. So you're really driving that point, and I'm with you. It grinds my gears when people universally call the notice to quit, which is truly the first step, and that's something the landlord can do just on their own, saying, hey, you have 10 days to cure or quit, to pay me the money you owe me, or stop doing the lease break you're doing, or quit, which means get out. And truly, that's just the 10 days I'm giving you to fix it before I go to the court. And people call that an eviction notice and treat it as if it's something that's going to happen. As I like to say, they think ninjas are going to come in through the windows and kick them out, and it creates a lot of fear.
Yes.
Jesse, is there a misconception you've seen in your 4 almost years now in this industry that grinds your gears?
Well, and it's all around the timeline that it actually takes. And although I think the path is really well set out for landlords to pursue it, I think that there's a giant misconception on all parties of how quickly it can actually happen from housed to unhoused. In the counties we operate in, it takes about a minimum of 6 weeks if all the steps are applicable. And from the tenant's perspective, especially if you have an unsophisticated landlord who's not represented by a professional management company, there's a lot of fear around this word eviction. It gets thrown around. And just this past week, I was advising a friend of a friend of a friend who is a very young person in her first rental, and she had an unauthorized animal in her unit and was caught, and her unsophisticated landlord has only been a landlord for about 6 months, and this is probably his first lease violation. He just told her that he was going to evict her. He was going to the magistrate, was going to evict her the next day if she didn't get rid of this dog. And she, of course, was panicked that she was going to become less than housed the very next day.
As a brand new dog mom.
And, and of course I could not advise her legally, but just kind of let her know what her options are. And I did a very quick review of her 1.5-page lease and saw that she had not waived her right to a notice to quit. And I also advised her to take a very professional, mature approach with this landlord, that he was just trying to reduce his risk as much as possible. Yeah. And it's all about the length of time and it takes, and it does take some time. She was very scared, and I'm sure that property owner was very scared too. And at the end, they reached a very reasonable, amicable agreement. No one was evicted the next day or even will be in 6 weeks.
That's good. I have a different grievance, and you guys are frustrated that people think the eviction process happens overnight, and I'm frustrated when I talk to investors. So again, just to clarify everything, we're talking about Pennsylvania here. We're Pennsylvania gals. We manage hundreds and hundreds of doors in Pennsylvania. This is Pennsylvania knowledge. So I hear it takes 5-6 months and thousands of dollars to evict somebody. It's not even worth it. The courts aren't on our side. Two things. One, No, the courts aren't on your side, but they're not on the tenant side either. They do hold landlords, investors, housing providers, whatever you want to call them, to a higher standard. You have to do things right. You have to follow ordinances and laws, and that is true. Now, do I think these people are lying? Do I think Stan, who's grumbling to me at the bar about his 6-month eviction horror story, is lying? No. What he's not telling you, though, is that he spent 3 months dicking around, trying to text him into paying, trying to convince himself that he can hook him up with a better job to get him to pay, criticizing everything they've bought that he thinks is a new outfit or whatever. He spent 3 months messing around, telling everybody he's ever met on Facebook and at the Legion that he's got a problem. And then he finally went and maybe decided to do something about it. He certainly didn't hire an attorney or CourtZip, and he messes it up. He fills out the paperwork incorrectly, does something out of order, and it causes these delays. That's how Stan, the mystery guy I've made up, ends up telling you a true story that it took him 6 months and it cost him all this. But when I sit there and tell investors, it's 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Maybe 7 if it's Christmas and the calendars are a little wonky. At least in central Pennsylvania, our courts are efficient, they're not backlogged, and the process takes 6 weeks.
Yep.
And that's my big grievance. I wish I could explain it's not taking long and costing you more because of the system. Because you're a coward and you don't know what you're doing.
No,
The
absolutely.
first half of delay is your cowardice, and the second half
Yep.
is your inexperience and don't know what you're doing, and you're scared to pay an attorney. Honestly, it doesn't cost that much to have it done expertly.
Right. No, absolutely.
Anyway, that's our grievances. We're ready for the next segment called Hold the Presses. We're going to react to news that's come out. And there's some interesting news that's come out relative to Pennsylvania in the last year. July 18th, 2024, we have an article here that came out on PBS, and they were talking about how there was a free legal representation service for low-income tenants that started in Philadelphia. And it's been in, for how long has that been there?
2019, I believe.
Okay. And they now are going to extend this statewide. So there are a couple of contingencies here. Basically, it's available to households earning up to 125% of the federal poverty line. And just that translates for a family of 4 to be $39,000. And more than 1 million Pennsylvanians are living below that poverty line. And what they're doing is when these tenants have an issue, they're able to get free legal representation to aid them in court. Now, Devon, have you seen people getting this representation yet?
Absolutely, yes.
We haven't. Tell us what that looks
Yes.
like.
Every court does it differently, which is just kind of think how every court in Pennsylvania does does it anyways. Nobody's the same. But we have a lot of our Berks County courts where we'll go in, there will be like a court-appointed attorney there. They'll meet with the tenant ahead of time, go into the little room, talk things over. We might then have a conversation. Can we work something out before we go in to see the judge? If we can't, we'll go in and see the judge. And then from there, generally, there'll be a continuance because now this attorney's involved if there's additional information. So that can, push things back. But overall, it is a really nice process. I'm pro this. I really think that it's okay that our tenants have, free legal representation. We're the professionals. We should be the ones going in there fully prepared, knowing what they're doing. They don't. Or, a single mom with 2 kids, she's freaking out. Like, this is scary. This is the most personal thing you can do with a stranger is, interact with their home and then possibly take it away. So I am 100% like, yes, let's help them however we can. So that way, long term, everybody wins. We don't want tenants being evicted. We want tenants paying. So let's figure out how to do that,
You've heard it 1,000 times. Your network is your net worth. But what are you actually doing about it? See, the most successful people I know dedicate time and money to growing and strengthening their networks. And I don't mean by joining Facebook groups and posting that you're looking for deals. Here's a tip: that doesn't work. You have to be in person with people who share your interests and be willing to help each other. At the Williamsport Area Real Estate Investors Meetup, the largest in the region, we do just that. We're focused on making sure you meet people that help you achieve your goals. This isn't one of those events where speakers pitch you their overpriced courses or books. Nope. We bring in legit experts to drop actual value, and it's totally free. For now, but don't hold me to that forever, because this is too good and the room only holds so many. Get the dates, times, and speaker lineup at holditwithpmgen.com. That's holditwithpmgen.com, and I will see you there.
How long would you say this service for those tenants delays the eviction process?
It's about maybe 2 weeks.
Okay, so
Yeah.
instead of 6 weeks, you're looking at 8 weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. What do you think about this, Jesse?
Well, I think everyone wins with the insertion of professional services. So we believe that all the parties involved in owning and renting rental homes win when professional property management is inserted. And I think the insertion of professional services like legal aid just helps advocate and represent people and bring people onto a more even playing field.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the language used in even the leases is elevated. There are laws about what level these documents are supposed to be written in, but I've seen some that seem to be written in some sort of old English, and you need to have studied Shakespeare in order to interpret what they're saying. And it does help even the playing field a little bit. And ultimately, if you are following the rules as a landlord or a property manager, there's nothing to be concerned about with legal representation on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm on the same page as you guys. I have just a little bit of a different thought about it, which I want everybody to be treated fairly in the system. That is ideal, because I think, to your point, everything moves smoother. But what about, it's people like your clients at CourtZip. It's people like our clients. I get clients simply because they're scared of possibly having to evict someone. Mm-hmm. That is such a traumatic prospect that they're like, I will have this property manager forever to protect me. So I wonder about them. The 60 to 65% of rental housing units in this country that are owned by individuals, people like you and me, dentists, teachers, plumbers, little old ladies who that is their retirement income. And I'll rant for a second about the problem I had during COVID, which was, I understood that housing providers were asked to be patient. We're asked to work with government funding, to keep peace in the streets and do those things. But no other industry was asked to do that. Hospitals still got to charge. The grocery store got to charge. The electric company got to charge. The mortgage companies were charging, right? Well, some of those mortgages, we had some programs there. Okay. But housing providers were told, no, they don't have to pay you. You still have to provide the housing service. And it just further perpetuates the idea that rental property owners are these big, huge, faceless corporations that are just vaults full of money, and that it's all just gravy, when the truth is, these are people just like you and me, and they need that money to make that mortgage payment, to continue providing the services, whatever it is. So I would like to see, when we have programs like this, the other side of the aisle. If we're willing to say, hey, tenants need to be represented, particularly those who are economically vulnerable, then the same might be true of the housing provider. And if we could give them some assistance, wouldn't we increase the good treatment that tenants are getting? They'd be discriminated against less. They'd be able to make, and by the way, enforce their lease agreements, because that property owner is so frustrated that he or she can't enforce their agreement. Well, I'm glad you ladies shared your opinion on that. I have another one kind of along that line. And University of Michigan published a study specifically around Pennsylvania eviction court filings. And they said, we looked at eviction court filings across Pennsylvania, and we focused on the best case scenario. So that a best case scenario for the tenant, meaning they arrived, they were legally represented, and they had won their case. The case was withdrawn. They did not get a judgment against them. They didn't lose, so to speak. However, they said, the overwhelming majority of these tenants are facing further discrimination down the line because of these public records that exist, and we see them. It's part of our screening process. When somebody applies, we're going to check the docket system. Now, I know at One Focus, and I would assume at ARC Property Management, when it's withdrawn or not a successful judgment, it's not counted against a tenant, just the same way any other criminal charge would be. But it's what they're reporting, what tenants are reporting, is this is a significant barrier to getting properties, keeping properties, and it affects their housing security. And the proposal here, the call to action is, let's seal all eviction records. What do you think about that?
So again, it goes back to, there is a difference between an eviction record and a judgment against you. Those are two different things. So if we're saying we're going to seal, so you don't know if somebody was evicted, but you can see if they were filed against, again, two different things. So we need to have clarity in regard to like what they're proposing for that. Then the other part too is, as a property management company or a property manager, or even as an individual landlord investor, you need to know how to read the docket sheet. So it's one, if nobody knows what we're talking about, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐞.courts.us, I believe is the website. You can hop on there, you'll do a case search. You'll search by participant name. So John Smith is your tenant. He's applied to rent from you. You look up his last name, first name. The docket type is a landlord-tenant complaint, and then you're going to look for active or inactive, whatever the open case status is you're looking for, and it will generate, and it will show you if he was filed on, for what amount. And then if you scroll down on that first page to the second page, you're going to see the history of events from when the court received the paperwork, when the judgment was received, did they file an order of possession, was that order of possession served, and then was it withdrawn? So if you see that withdrawn, that means that they canceled that. So that tenant either paid that balance or moved the pit bulls out of his basement, or whatever the reason was that, he was in that process in the first place. So that, again, is very different than actually being evicted. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's one issue I take with the docket sheets, because you gave a tremendous example of how I search the docket system. However, and let's just use Jesse here as an example. Jesse's applied to rent with us, and we put Jesse Rulins into the system, and we start finding results. The problem is when you're doing underwriting like this, you need to double verify the data. And what that means is you need to have two data points line up between the evidence, in this case, the docket sheet, and my applicant. So that might be name, date of birth,
Correct.
address, social security number. Well, here's a fun fact. There are no addresses, there are no dates of birth, there are no social security numbers on these here. And so what we have to do is, say I found one on Jesse Rulins, and I have to look at the person it was against, the property owner, and then look up those properties that that person owns, and then try to cross-reference it to the addresses on Jesse's credit report. Isn't that a fun? And I don't think that people who are hearing us and they think they're looking up the USJ system, and Jesse Rulins is a really, there's no other Rulinses. We already checked. But, Tom Jones. Tom Jones has rights. Tom Jones is not going to accept his rental application being denied based on an eviction that you cannot double verify. And that's, I think, where sometimes landlords get themselves in trouble. It's just talking about these records and things.
Absolutely. And the flip side to that too, if you're a company and you're using a system like Buildium or Appfolio or one of those big property management software programs, they're not always going to catch it either. Or if it does show up, it'll show up again only if they've been evicted. A lot of these companies will pull that. So then if you're cross-referencing and using the 𝐬𝐻, now you can be like, oh, well, wait, I have two different types of information. What's going on? So it's the big picture. It's really, again, doing your due diligence, making sure you're, giving this person an opportunity. You're checking everything. You're being thorough. So, yeah.
Right.
Is real estate investment just so much harder than you thought? I know it seems unfair, but, and I say this with love, that's what the money's for. Taking the risk and figuring out the problems. And if you do it well, you are handsomely rewarded. Lucky for you, I've got 2 new events lined up that will change the game for you. First up, Deal Tours. Imagine spending an entire day with me, walking through multifamily properties available for sale, off market of course, breaking down the numbers and figuring out how to stabilize and add value like a pro. I am making that dream a reality, and whether you're actively buying or just sharpening your skills, this is where real investors learn to win. First one is in spring 2025. And this fall, the Buy Better, Hold Better Summit. One day, top tier education, industry experts with experience in the North Central PA market who actually know what they're talking about, and the connections you need to make your investment success possible. Think of it as a masterclass in buy and hold real estate. Additionally, the room is full of people doing the same thing as you, so you can build that network with little effort. Don't forget, for the 4th year in a row, we are hosting our Williamsport area real estate investor meetups every other month in Linden. Want the inside track? Of course you do. Go to holditwithpmgen.com and register for event updates. And while you're at it, follow me, Hold It with PM Gen, on Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Helping real people grow real wealth with real estate.
Let's move on to our next segment called Hold My Drink. And this is my favorite one. We get to tell our favorite stories. Jesse, I want to hear your craziest. This is such a baby in this. He hasn't even been here 4 years in this industry. But what's your craziest eviction story in your baby career? Look, I was just like I started off by saying she takes away all my self-confidence, and then I do this to her.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, it's
not
weird.
great.
I think my favorite eviction story isn't one that I experienced. It's one that got us hired.
Oh.
And we had a mom and pop landlord. It was a married couple with a young child. They bought their first investment property, 4 units, and they were hell-bent on self-managing, and they purposefully bought this property just a quarter mile from their personal property so they could keep their eyes on it, and they were so excited, and they were going to renovate it and chock it full of people they know and trust, and was such a good plan. And they quickly had a tenant stop paying rent when they took ownership. And they were quickly made to landlord harder than they had anticipated. And it only matters in this story for color, but the tenant was a handicapped man in a wheelchair.
I see.
And this man put up quite the resistance to the process. Oh. And although was not paying rent, he was really calling their bluff on everything. And these fine folks got some representation and followed the process. And on eviction day, on lockout day, they went there with the constable to serve this eviction, and probably hoping and praying that this gentleman had moved out and left the place pristine and ready to hit the market the next day. And what they found was a man who was calling their bluff and was not doing anything. And the police had to be called, and the man just refused to leave. And this happens so infrequently. Yeah. Normally it goes so much smoother than this. And ultimately the individual refused to participate in his eviction, and they did pick him up in the chair and remove him from the property. And their very next call was to a professional property management company, so they would never be in that situation. And
yeah, because they're standing on the street watching this like man get carried out of their, and they can't handle that.
Well, yeah. And there's all the implications of it being a handicapped person and everything else. And they had no idea what they had gotten themselves into. And so that's probably my favorite one that got us hired.
Do you have a good one that you're willing to tell us, Devon?
Oh, I have seen some wild things, from people losing it in court, screaming at judges, running out of courtrooms, to, all sorts of in-betweens. But one that really has stood with me, and I hope we don't have any children listening. It was an actual lockout. So we show up with the constable. It is just myself, my maintenance guy who's changing the locks, and the constable. Constable knocks, nobody answers. So we open the door and go in. And this 5-bedroom row house in the city of York has been turned into something from 50 Shades of Grey. There were contraptions hanging from the ceiling and things I've never seen before. And
the whole house was done like this?
The whole house was done like that. And not only that,
5-bedroom house?
Yes, and there were people in some of the rooms. They were passed out, but they weren't clothed. And there was copious amounts of, pot and alcohol and some lines, So we saw everything. So we ended up actually having to Constable called for backup, had to come in to drag these people out. And so that was...
Go work for Art. That was a good time.
That was probably one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. So, yeah.
That is wild.
Yeah.
I have 2 really short ones. My wildest eviction story is the one time I evicted somebody and they didn't get a full security deposit refund because the eviction was for non-payment of rent, but I applied their full security deposit because it was left ready to rent. I mean, that never happened. Yeah. It was so clean, so nice. And I was really flabbergasted. They were terrific despite the unfortunate need to evict them. The other one was when I got the house back. And so in this case, an institution was doing land acquisition to expand their campus, right? And so they had done a lot, and there was this one owner who wouldn't sell. You know, you get holdouts and things like this. Well, this fella died, and the heirs sold it off, but he was so dedicated to this not really benefiting this institution. He had written really long, cheap leases for these tenants, right? So the property gets sold to the institution, and the institution calls me and is like, hey, we are an institution. We do very fancy things here. We don't talk to tenants about rent and housing and things like that. So we need you. But what we really need is for you to get rid of these tenants because we want to knock this building down. Like, it's more valuable to us as a plot of earth. And I was like, okay, that's kind of like the opposite of what I usually do. Like, I'm usually like just trying to keep people happy and keep the rent paid, but okay, we're going to destroy this house. Great. And so we made some parameters that I was permitted to kind of negotiate in. And I went the very first day to this double. It was 2 units. And I knock on the first door and I hear fighting. I hear like a couple fighting, like a married couple or whatever. And they are big mad at each other. And I'm like, oh, this is awkward, but also like, is this an opportunity? So they open the door and I'm like, hi, I'm Jen. I'm your new landlord. Like, can't wait to meet you. And I just said, like, this is kind of awkward, but based on what I heard on the porch, like, do you all want to leave? Like, if I showed up here tomorrow with half the security deposit made out to your name and half made out to your name, which isn't really how things are done, but how it was done that day. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, is this really going to work? It did. I showed up the next day. I said, the good news is you can leave anything you want behind. Like, this is the full security deposit. You owe us no more rent. You're just done. And I was able to capitalize on just a weak moment in their marriage to get that property back. The other side wasn't as much of a fun story. They really held on and made it every bit as hard as they could. Well, this is great. I'm really happy we got to spend this time together today and learn a little bit more about you. But I want to learn, Devon, could you share with us just a little bit about how CourtZip works? Because a lot of people who watch and engage with this content could potentially use your services. What would it look like for them?
So the way we operate, you would just go to our website. It's www.courtzip.com. You'll create a login. There's no charge to do this. There's no monthly fee. You will enter in your information as if you're filling out a landlord-tenant complaint. It's all formatted to just enter the tenant's name, the balance that's owed, or whatever the breach of lease is. It'll walk you through it. You upload your documents, click submit. It comes to us. We'll make sure it goes to the correct magisterial district justice office. We'll send the check out. We'll invoice you in the back end. If you want us to attend court on your behalf, we can do that as well. Also, if you want us to attend your lockout, we'll show up, change your locks, make sure your property's secured, and leave you to it. So,
wow. And so you all aren't attorneys, though?
Correct. We are not attorneys.
So you're truly operating as an agent of the owner. And this is probably most ideal for those who can't physically go do things like file at court, either because they're maybe not able to get out or they're not local.
Yep, absolutely.
Very interesting. I think that really plugs up a hole in the market where and these people are willing to engage with services like yours. And truly, as we were talking about earlier, for evictions, it's not that complicated.
No, it's not.
It really isn't. Well, thank you for that. And if people want to get a hold of you, how might they contact you?
Our website's the best way, www.courtzip.com, or you can call 717-900-1984.
Thanks so much. Jesse, any words you want to leave us with today?
No.
Okay. Interesting choice. Well, I'll let you know that it's important for you to remember that time heals all deals. And as our angels Wilson Phillips tell us, we just need to hold on for one more day. Come back and see us next time.